Hi, everyone. I'm Thomas. We're going to start in a couple of minutes. Let's just give everybody a bit of time and allow for a bit of late arrivals to join us as well. We'll be right there, 2 or 3 more minutes. And in the meantime, thanks for joining. We'll be right back. So once again, hi everyone. In case you just joined us, we're gonna allow for 2 or 3 more minutes of extra time for any late arrivals to join us. In the meantime, get settled. Pop a note in the chat section to let us know where you're joining from, what your brand or company is, or any other information you want to share. And thanks for joining us. We will have a bit of time for Q&A at the end of the webinar, so don't worry if you've got any questions up front or during our webinar, just put them in the chat as well, and my colleagues will collect them and pass on a couple of the most interesting questions to Diana and me. Hi, everyone. Just another quick heads up. We'll start in 1 more minute, just giving late arrivals a chance to log in and join us. And in the meantime, feel free to share any information you have in the chat. We'll be right there. All right. That should be enough time for everyone to join. So without further ado, let's get started with our Branding Beverages webinar, where we're going to cover a couple of techniques, going from the basics to novel techniques on how to position and differentiate your beverage brand. We're super excited to be here. Thanks for joining us. That's me, Thomas Vanden Abeele. I'm co-founder and strategic director at WeWantMore Design Studio. I'm joined by my brilliant colleague, Diana Goderich, who is a brand strategist in my team and a very esteemed colleague. We are WeWantMore. So as I said, a branding and design studio. We are based in London, UK, and in Antwerp, Belgium. I'm Belgian myself, as are a couple of my colleagues. We are a 37-strong team and growing and loving what we do. What we do is brand strategy, brand identity, sort of visual graphic side of things. Packaging design is quite a big part of what we do. We also, interestingly, do spatial design, and we have a very strong focus on sustainability. And when I say strong focus, I mean we really take action, and we're not just talking about thought leadership here, but I will need to talk about that some other time. The reason why we are here is that we looked at the beverage space, and honestly, we said, it's a jungle out there. We had to salute all of the brand managers and marketeers working in the beverage or drinks category, because honestly, it's one of the fastest moving, most chaotic categories out there. I think it's rivaled practically almost only by the technology sector, because there's really a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, I mean, we've got, most likely, we have some non-alcoholic brands dialing in. We've got alcoholic beverages, beer and spirits and otherwise. Beer production, beer consumption is going down, and that's something that we see as a global phenomenon. It's happening in the US, it's happening in the UK as well. British youth are turning off booze. It's happening in France, where the French start to drink less wine. And when the French start drinking less wine, the proverbial shit is hitting the fan. Alcohol industry panics as healthier habits cut sales. And on the other hand, we've seen like the craft beer category sort of explode and then implode because lots of craft breweries are either selling out to big corporate brands or going bankrupt. And I think honestly, at the same time, I think craft outplayed itself because at a certain point, your brands become so maximalist. I mean, when you start calling your beers Disco Forklift Truck and brew Mango Pale Ale, it becomes hard for new entries to still get a slice of the attention pie. So we see beer brands looking at alternatives going beyond beer. We've seen, interestingly, lemonade turn into like a super adult, premium, sophisticated category where before, let's face it, lemonade was for kids. At the same time, there's private pressure coming from hard discounters. This is an image of the Infusionist, which is Aldi's brand of spirits. And honestly, it's quite well designed. There's nothing wrong with the image you're seeing here. And then obviously, we're seeing a lot of new entrants in the market space, notably a lot of celebrities. So at the left is George Clooney presenting his Casamigos brand of tequila. On the right-hand side, nobody knows who this guy is. It's Randy Gerber. He's smiling for two reasons. First of all, he's married to supermodel Cindy Crawford. Second of all, he sold his brand to Diageo in 2017 for $8 billion. So quite a serious player in the category. Ryan Reynolds has aviation gin sold to Diageo for $600 million. And speaking as a Belgian, I had to mention our own Belgian Hollywood pride, Jean-Claude Van Damme, who also launched his own brand of whiskey called Old Oak, launched in 2023. No sale yet. Keep it up, Jean-Claude. But it's not just male celebrities. Emma Watson is launching her Rennes gin, if I'm not mistaken. Gillian Anderson launched her G-Spot No Low alternative based on sexual well-being. Katy Perry has launched this de soy or de soy, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, honestly, which is a non-alcoholic alternative as well. And it's not just the big Hollywood celebs. I mean, Logan Paul launched his Prime beverage together with KSI. So influencers are stepping into the game as well. And they're not reaching adults only because lots of teens jumped on the Prime bandwagon. We got Prime, and it's crazy. If you think about it, most brands need to pay to get their advertising out there. Logan Paul actually gets paid when people watch his advertising. So serious competition. And I'm not even mentioning cannabis industry stepping into the beverage space as well. So honestly, it's a super crowded and challenging space. And we wanted to help you out, our clients out, or prospective clients, or just about any brand manager or marketeer. How to differentiate your beverage brand in today's challenging market. That's the topic of today. Is it hard work? Yes, but we believe that if you take the right approach, use the right techniques, it can be smart work as well. And that's the way to go. We're going to cover quite a bit of info today, starting with the basics. Somehow my colleague Diana gets to talk about all of the cool stuff, and I need to do the 101. I'm going to talk about positioning, the basics, how you can reframe a perceptual map to come up with more interesting ideas, a couple of special cases and approaches, and then we're going to dive into the real nitty-gritty, which is novel approaches and techniques for contemporary brands. So like I said, first, strategic move is finding an empty spot. And this is probably nothing new for a part of you. For that, we use typically a classic 2x2 matrix where you map two dimensions, one on a horizontal and one on a vertical axis, and you find an interesting, opportune place to go. Typically, for the beer category, for example, you would have a vertical about taste complexity with simple taste at the bottom, complex at the top, and from left to right, you would have an axis from tradition to innovation, which is like a timestamp or a way to deal with technology and other cultural influences. And obviously, this is fairly easy to understand. You would have complex, more difficult taste profiles or more sophisticated degustations of beers at the top left in the traditional corner with brands like Duvel, one of our Belgian crown jewels, Rustic Heritage as a quadrant. At the bottom with a more simple taste profile, but still tradition, you would have iconic lagers such as Stella Artois. We seem to be doing quite well in the beer department in Belgium, as we all know. On the bottom right, where you have simpler taste, but combined with innovation, novelty, we have accessible specialty beers like localized beers, Mexican beers, party beers, like first entries to fruit beers that we've seen for a while. And obviously, that leaves the question, so what then is at the top right quadrant? This is an example of how you can use a 2x2, because if there's an open space, it means there's no competition. And it's a space that kind of makes sense to play in. And if we would do this 10 years ago, we would say, well, this is where craft beer should have a place. But at the moment, I think this needs to be updated. But this is just the technique. Obviously, it sounds like the holy grail in theory, where you find a new space without any competitors, and that's super differentiated from everything else in the market or a competitive set. But in reality, there's bit of a problem with the classic approach to 2x2 mappings, in that everybody uses the same axes, or almost everybody, and the axes often come from research where consumers are asked about how they see the competitive set or the competitive landscape, and it tends to use like researchy axes like price and premium perception, etc. It also oversimplifies complex realities because it's a two-dimensional model, and also it cannot fix the reality of being in an oversaturated market. So what can we then do? We can reframe the map to make things a bit more interesting. Looking at soda, for example, a typical research-based set of dimensions would be a vertical that's almost always about price, super classic, where you go from affordable to premium, and on a horizontal axis, you go from low sugar to high sugar content. We're not going to spend any more time here because this is honestly too traditional. It's not going to offer a lot of new insights. That changes, however, when you start making things more interesting and you try to come up with a set of dimensions that's more rooted in where culture and consumer motivations are at the moment. So if we reframe, same competitive set, it's the same set of players, but you look at a different set of axes. On the vertical, we could put the emotional and functional benefits of soda and go from indulgence to nourishment, where indulgence is really on hedonism and enjoyment, and nourishment is about, let's say, more wholesome nutritional aspects or health. And from left to right, we could talk about nostalgia to futurism, which is a variant of tradition to innovation. That would give us quadrants or areas like grandma's recipes, where Blake Lively, it's not just Ryan Reynolds launching his own drink, his wife Blake Lively is doing the same with Betty Buzz and Betty Booze, mocktails and alcoholic cocktails, made according to grandma's recipe, very high on indulgence and nostalgia. At the top left, you could have a brand like Olipop, which is all about more nutritional value, but with a nostalgic twist. You can tell from the design, it's got like a 70s vintage or maybe even 50s vintage twist to it, using probiotics, plant fiber, etc., to nourish the body. And then when we talk about nourishing on a futuristic level, we move into more exciting territories like mood boosters, sort of mood enhancers, mental state, microbiomes, nootropics, adaptogens, epigenetics, etc. It's a super interesting space where a lot of stuff is happening. And once again, this begs the question, so what would that then be in the bottom right-hand corner, where we have futurism and indulgence? Honestly, I don't have the answer. And that's kind of a good sign, because that means this space is largely unexplored or underexplored. And that's the cool thing about reframing. You can use it, basing yourself in sort of innate aspects of your brand or culture, your DNA, and reframe an existing competitive set and perceptual mapping to come up with a more interesting view on the category and unlock empty positions that you can then enter. For the record, I think Coca-Cola tried something in the futuristic indulgence corner with their zero sugar Coca-Cola Bite limited edition. It's supposed to have the flavor of a pixel. I don't know what a pixel tastes like. Interesting to see. I don't think they're there yet. And honestly, given their 80s synthwave visual style, maybe it's a bit of nostalgia, retro futurism as well. But indulgence, futurism could be interesting for a couple of people in this webinar. Moving on to special cases and approaches based still on the classic 2x2. There's one that we need to mention, but my colleague Diana is going to talk about this at much more length later in the webinar, and that's a 2x2, but that talks about emotion. It's a classic model as well. It's the Sensidium model, also known as the Kantar model more recently, which maps horizontally a social dimension and vertically a personal dimension. That's about extroversion versus introversion, or more risk averse versus more risk loving. But Diana will tell us more about emotional branding. Another one that's really interesting, or one that you need to be aware of when you're filling out the perceptual map and looking for positioning, is the line. That's what happens when you get logical correlations between the two dimensions that you pick. For instance, classic one, you take a vertical on price and a horizontal axis on quality. Obviously, the budget offerings would offer lower quality, and you would assume that the premium offerings offer higher quality. I'm using a very forced, simplistic example on purpose here, but that's when you get a linear distribution. The interesting thing is, when you get a linear distribution, typically two new quadrants pop up. At the bottom right, you've got high quality at a low price. That's where we say, well, obviously everybody would love to have this, but you can't solve it because it's impossible to do with the current state of technology or production facilities. And then on the left top hand corner, you've got a really weird place where you have low quality, or relatively speaking low quality, at a premium price. And it's an area where honestly your gut instinct is to say, well, who the hell would want to have that, have low quality at a premium price? In reality, what we see is at budget prices, high quality, that's where we see functional disruption happening, where new processes are being unlocked due to technology or other factors, science. And at the top left, we see brand disruption happening, where really new, twisted, irrational approaches are taken within a category that allow you to offer, relatively speaking, lower quality at a high price. This is where you get Veblen or positional goods and conspicuous consumption. And an example of the bottom right, where you unlock the holy grail of low prices, high quality, for example, is replica wines, that took a very interesting novel approach. They started making clones of the most expensive wines in the world by actually mirroring the chemical composition, so the exact molecules that they find in the high quality, high price wines. They mimic them at a lower price, and obviously without the branded label, but still super interesting to see how they tackle this. Positional goods, honestly, I'm sure you've seen the brand before. Liquid Death, this is a quote from a consumer. I don't understand it. Is it not just expensive tap water? Yes, exactly. It's very expensive tap water, but this is where we see brand disruption happening, allowing you to have a relatively low quality product at a relatively premium price. Lastly, last special case before we dive into the novel techniques, the core. This is a really weird one to understand, because where most of the things we talk about in positioning and differentiating yourself, it's on picking a different position from all of the other players in your category or comp set. And the core, honestly, is about the complete opposite. It's focusing your energy on a core value of the complete category, which sounds weird because it sounds like doing what everybody else is doing. But it's not doing what everybody else is doing if you double down and focus completely on this core value. Any car manufacturer in the world is going to tell you, yes, my cars are safe. Yes, it's a very important feature of our car. And it's going to be a very important part of the communication mix. But as a brand essence or core positioning or proposition, there's only one car manufacturer that made it the brand core. And we see something similar happen in beverage spaces. We've got examples sometimes from other categories because it helps to illustrate the point. Sorry about that. But within mineral water, for example, one of the core values that you see returning is a sort of Zen-like balance. In beer, something that we often see pop up in lager or pilsner is having a nice ice cold refreshing beer. Many players talk about it, use it in their advertising, but on the left hand side you see the beer Antarctica Sub-Zero, and they actually made it their core statement or core positioning and differentiation. They double down on being the coldest beer out there, filtered under 0% temperature and served ice cold, as is expressed well visually. It's cool because it gives you a sense of clarity. Honestly, as a consumer, imagine, if you ask people in research what they know about a brand, they're often not going to be able to list the 5 brand values that are in a brand book, but they will just name one thing. What do you think when you hear the brand name Volvo? Safety. And the clarity that you get that way is a bit of a luxury in modern times. And we sort of did a similar thing for Belgian mineral water brand Spa, another one of our crown jewels, where we said, well, our brand is going to be all about purity. The purest water, het zuiverste water. And everything we did design-wise after that for the brand was about purity and making very simple, iconic statements, using the water drop literally as part of the design in everything we do. It's in advertising, it's in motion, it's in outdoors, and it's even in the shape of the packaging where you see the ripple effect of the label of the water droplet actually rippling across the surface of the PET bottle. So it's a good example of how you can double down on one category benefit. Now we get to the cool part, the new approaches and techniques. First of all, and then I'm going to pass the mic to my esteemed colleague, Diana. First of all, I want to talk about hybrid brands. The chapter title here is The Perfect Drink is Neither Fish Nor Fowl. And what we want to highlight here is that you can actually get a much sharper brand position and brand proposition by blurring the lines between different categories. And it only makes sense. I mean, if a category is completely crowded and every obvious choice is already, or every obvious position is taken, the way to end up with new positions is to mix, layer, blend, combine parts of different categories or different types of beverages. And it happens in lots of different categories. For example, this is a showroom for a chain of glasses, just spectacles, but it looks like an art gallery or an installation. Is it a store? I mean, it's hard to tell, honestly, and every showroom that they have is different. It's worth checking out online, do some research. Gentle Monster, and it's a good example of a hybrid category. And it works really well because we all know consumers need novelty. They crave stimulation and something new. Familiarity breeds contempt, obviously. And crossbreeding, it works across a lot of categories. It's not just for dogs. We see it in automotive because honestly, this is one of the first mainstream hybrids, the BMW X6, the sports utility vehicle. If you think about it, even the abbreviation, I mean, if it's a utility vehicle, it's not going to be a sports car. If it's a sports car, it's not going to be a utility vehicle. But when you create a hybrid, you can come up with something completely new. Another example, this is one of our designs, is Wasbar, which is like a brunchy cafe, but it's also part laundromat. So students can go there, do the laundry, have a snack, have something to drink, talk with a friend, meet people, wait for the laundry to finish, put it in the dryer, have another drink, go home. So nice hybrid. And obviously, we see that happening within the beverages category as well, with brands like Hio Social Tonic. It's a cool brand. Look it up. It's a social, non-alcoholic social tonic, and honestly, I'm just gonna throw it out there. It blends beverages with narcotics in a sense, in that it talks about offering an altered mental state that makes you more relaxed, makes you more outgoing, more sociable. And they don't call it a high, they call the mental state the float. But it's obvious and clear what they are referencing here. But it's a completely new category, and that's just because they take part of the beverage category, part of, let's say, the cannabis category, and blend it into something completely new. Cool thing is, it's fun. Nothing is of limits. You can go really far out. There's a couple of caveats. Watch out with the other categories that you reference. Jaguar made a bit of a faux pas last year by referencing what some people called high fashion. Other people saw it as the sex toy industry, and it didn't work really well because they alienate their consumers. For Drink a Flower, one of our clients, we did something really cool where we matched soda pop with a botanical health drink. And another example is Belgian Owl whiskey, where we actually created an interesting cross-cultural hybrid that mixes Scottish whiskey with Belgian whiskey. I'd love to go into the details, but we won't have the time for that today. That being said, consumers don't care about the rules. All they want is to be delighted, shocked, or triggers. So go far out, mix, match, layer, blend, combine, find interesting new hybrids, and actually get a sharper positioning by blurring the lines. I'm going to hand the mic over to my colleague Diana, who will take you through 5 more super interesting contemporary techniques to differentiate your brand. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Thomas. So let's just jump right into it. So why is tapping into the darker emotional motivation an interesting way to differentiate your brand? Well, you see, tapping into positive motivations is a safe bet. And of course, it's understandable when you have a boardroom of executives to answer to. But it is also very limiting to explore only half of the human emotional spectrum. And what about the other darker half? So addressing the antagonist or the anti-narrative can be a great way to step completely out of bounds of what is already out there. And radical honesty and kind of it can be quite liberating to admit your darker motivations, right? And quite helpfully, it's quite on culture these days because current times are marked, or should we say red flagged, by ambiguous morals and fascination for stuff that was once, well, quite frowned upon. People are accepting and even celebrating their vices by doing things like hate watching, creating lo-fi content, making FU purchases, and generally kind of diving more and more into hedonism and consumption. People are fascinated with the darker sides of themselves. We're ready to explore it playfully or more seriously. And it goes from shadow journaling to kind of embracing villain era music, the power of the no word and boundaries. There's just a deep sense of coolness to nihilism. It's a ripe field for those who dare to take a step outside of what is acceptable. So why shouldn't brands do the same? And of course, let's go back to Liquid Death. There's a reason this brand is mentioned so much in presentations and webinars, haha, because they tried and they succeeded in carving out a truly unique position for themselves, tapping into hydration from a badass angle. They created a killer brand copy. It's quite morbid, it's full of skulls, black typography, and really kind of nailed down their message also visually. But let's move on to, for example, Burger King, which is not the first brand you think of when you think of maybe darker motivations or vices, but they also don't shy away from the shadow side. In this campaign in Brazil, they used facial recognition technology to determine how hungover you were and then offer you a discount depending on your state. So in a sea of endless goody two-shoes communication, it is quite an interesting opposition and a spiky comeback. And even the wellness industry isn't really free from darker motivational branding, even though the wellness industry is mostly quite a positive and happy space. So happy Tuesday. If you don't know this brand, festival season is coming up, so maybe look into it, because this is a supplement brand aimed at festival fans, or more specifically at rave fans. Their slogan is "Rave hard, recover fast." Makes it pretty clear what the brand is all about, and it doesn't hide their purpose. So it's all about helping their customers recover and deal with the crippling effects of an out of control night out. And they don't really do it by beating around the bush, but instead they just go with a playful, in the know tone of voice rather than kind of deny what their purpose is. Here's an example of how we use the darker side of human motivation in branding. So when Morsibit approached us to do the branding of their Juicy, their first instinct might have been to do something typical for Gen Z, and that's to tap into their kind of activist, green warrior, clean lifestyle motivations of the generation. But I'm sure you all already know, in reality, Gen Z, like all other generations, have a darker side. Some might even say it's actually more pronounced than others right now. So we tapped into it and we dramatized it. Sensationalism, glutanism, hedonism, gossip, and a penchant for nihilistic drama. And voila, we have Morsubit Juicy Crime of Passion. This unconventional approach allowed Morsubit to kind of sidestep the cliches of Gen Z branding and directly speak to their audience, and also to match the punchy taste of the drink with a punchy branding as well. Let's move on to our third section, which we have called Rising to the Occasion. We'll start with a little visualization. Think of the French game of pétanque. If you're not sure what I mean, that is here on the picture. Which drink comes to mind when you think of pétanque? All right, you got it. If you haven't, maybe it's because of where you live and maybe you don't know the game that well. But this one you'll get. It's New Year's Eve. It's the countdown. Everybody's shouting 10, 9, 8, 7. You're holding up a glass. What's in it? That's right. I think you all know. Some call it mental availability. Other people call it the when, where, with who. But we're all really kind of talking about the same thing. And we all know that occasion is key when it comes to beverage products. Now, the problem with claiming an occasion is, well, it's like dating in your 40s. Most of the good ones are taken. And that's also why we're probably seeing that in occasion definition, we're stepping outside of the old rule book. Because traditionally, occasions were well-defined moments of a time and a place or social setting, after work drinks, gathering with friends, bachelorette party. But today, there is more and more need to think of these moments in more emotional or mental dimensions. And this will open a range of new possibilities, simply because the hours in a day, they are fixed. But how we experience these hours in a day, or how we experience these moments, this is fluid and it's continuously changing because society and culture is also continuously changing. So for those of you who think, oh, this is nothing new, you are right, because categories like beer and tea and coffee have been playing with this idea for a while. But we see this also spreading to pretty unexpected categories like lemonade, hard spirits, but also dairy. That maybe doesn't make a lot of sense. So you see that it all stems from the fact that our needs are becoming more and more fragmented and more emotional. And this is creating a variety of micro occasions. So for example, a space that was incredibly rigid just a few years ago, like sports drinks, has really shifted in the last few years. So today it's really kind of redefined with sort of new moments. There's a pre-workout, there's a during workout, there's a post-workout, and even alcohol is no longer a taboo in the space because we have actually alcoholic brands that are tapping into the sports space, or we have non-alcoholic beer that is specifically targeted at sports or after sports or pre-sports. So it's all quite really fluid and flexible. But it doesn't even stop at sports drinks. There are drinks for menopause, there are drinks for menstruation, there's drinks for fertility. So again, think of like G-Spot, again, is also a drink specifically for various moments in the cycle or very specific needs for women. But you also even have drinks like iced coffee for gamers when you need that specific moment of focus when you're getting into the lair or you need to defeat the final boss. But now let's talk a little bit about some big brand examples. So Kahlua did something really interesting with their latest campaign. They decided to reclaim or claim Friday nights away from wine. So Friday night was typically, classically an occasion reserved for chilling and kind of taking a step back from the week hustle and winding down after your working week. But the team at Kahlua noticed, and quite smartly, that today people don't really follow the same old Friday night formula. So instead of trying to compete with wine or redefine how people see Kahlua, instead they redefine the moment. They present themselves as the answer for a more playful, personal version of TGIF. It's no longer wine o'clock. It's your Friday, your vibe, and maybe that's a coffee cocktail instead of a glass of red wine. Another great example, one of our own, is Desperados Exotica. So Desperados, as you know, is amazing at creating Latin party vibes. But for this new range, we wanted to escape some of the Latin party cliches, perhaps, and go for something really different. And we went for the local night shop. It's unexpected, it's urban, and it's very real for their target audience of this specific range: young urban drinkers and partygoers. So the night shop is really where they get their party started. It's where they get their pre-drink, their cheap pre-drink before they go to the party. Or maybe it's actually even where they continue to hang out because they're not actually going anywhere. They're just going to roam the streets and make the party themselves. So by shifting the setting, we actually shift the energy of the brand from sort of mass-produced to personal and from staged to spontaneous and real. All right, let's maybe move on to section number 4, the commercial authenticity comeback. Now, this one I am personally very excited about because it's all about the return of absolutely unabashed commercial aesthetics. So let's not panic. Authenticity isn't gone, it's being redefined. People are less about big mission statements and more into brands that are straight up about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And well, instead of pretending kind of to change the world, some brands are saying, well, we're here to sell, we're here to buy, let's not overcomplicate things. And this kind of honesty, it works because in a world full of really mixed messages, people do appreciate a kind of straight up, straightforward, uncomplicated communication. And this counts for branding and design too. Now, you might wonder how we got here or back here in a sense, because, well, for more than a decade, most brands avoided overly commercial communications in favor of more authentic visual styling. And they were answering a specific demand for curated and stylized images and worlds. But the result of this was this hyperblast of identical, purpose-driven, sustainable brands that were all catering to the same kind of lifestyle consumer that got inspired on Instagram and Pinterest. And every single brand was so damn authentic that it stopped being a differentiator. And all this social media, well, it didn't just make people super lifestyle. Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. If you could just give me a thumbs up that you can all hear me, or maybe a few of you can give me a thumbs up, that would be great. We're so sorry. Oh, thank you so much. We're so sorry about this. So incredibly difficult that something like this happens, of course. Apologies. So I hope you all use this moment to get a little beverage. We're back. So we were just talking about lifestyle and purpose-driven brands, and yeah, so every single brand was so freaking authentic, it just stopped being a differentiator. But as we said, the social media, it also had like an opposite effect, and the opposite effect was that people became more informed and they became more sort of aware of what was happening, and well, they became a little bit angry, to be honest, because greenwashing, pride washing, yeah, it's Pride Month, so have just watch out for that. This all kind of made people really allergic to these kind of things, and they didn't really like it, and they weren't afraid to say it. So brands were now at the mercy of consumers with very high values, and Gen Z was leading the charge. And the truth of the matter was that, well, not all brands are purpose driven, and people caught on to this. And this is where commercial authenticity made its spectacular comeback, because today the visual world, it's noisier than ever. And that's why in this brutal fight for attention, brands need to design for impact. That's the big shift. It's no longer about being tasteful and muted and cozy lifestyle. If you want to stop the scroll, you've got to make it bold, you've got to make it punchy, and you've got to make it clear. And a great example of this is Pickup Biscuits with a recent redesign. They leaned into this kind of maximalism, Spartan kind of maximalism. The logo is huge, the colors are loud, and the design is bold. And it works. Cuts through the noise, not by whispering, but by being refreshingly in your face and in a way that feels, well, confident, but honest instead of really try hard. And let's take also Sprinter, Kylie Jenner's ready to drink vodka soda. It doesn't pretend to be anything that it's not. It's bold, no nonsense, completely in love with itself, like Kylie Jenner. And it's really all about this celebrity centric photographic aesthetic. Big name, big product shot. It's clear what it's about. So this is your green light for visual worlds that are proud to sell. Clear product cues, packaging front and center. It's okay to be commercial. In fact, it's powerful. Think of it as the return of the golden age of advertising, and the message is simple. Here's the product, you want it, go get it. Let's move on to our fifth section, bottling emotion, not just flavor. So we talked a little bit about emotion and the Syncytium model in the first section. We're not going to talk about the Syncytium model now, but we are going to talk about the impact of emotion on branding, because the one thing that can give you an unfair advantage, well, it's meaning. I'll kick off with a somewhat radical thought, because in its bare essence, the drink market is quite functional, right? It's used primarily to hydrate or to intoxicate. And taste differentiation or functional benefits, they can only get you so far, because anyone can jump on the yuzu or the pistachio train, the bandwagon, or add cannabis to their soda. But, well, think back about sort of the wine by science example. But meaning, emotion, when done well, it's a powerful thing, and it's not easily replicated, because each sip should evoke a mood, and it should evoke a feeling. It's not just a drink, it's an invitation to feel free, to connect, to celebrate, to explore. So maybe ask yourself the question, which emotion are you selling? What's the meaning that you're selling? Is it transformative? Is it selfish? Is it self-expressive? Is it a little bit dark? Is it status? And what is your audience seeking? What are you answering to them? Let's take a look very quickly at some different emotions and meaning the brands that answer them. So Shiva Regal is all about success that's bordering on superiority, pride and personal achievement, and your victories. Richie, it leans into retro while staying a little bit rebellious. There's a little bit of freedom. There's a little bit of indie flair in here. Duvel, again, loving this example, so it's coming back, of course. It's all about Belgian heritage and timeless mastery. It's the connection with the traditional art of brewing and appreciation by true connoisseurs. Aperol is all about that moment of freedom and playfulness and turning any moment spontaneously into an Aperol moment, letting go of the work hustle. Fanta is fun and friendship and moments enjoyed together. And last but not least, Martini, universal choice for a little bit of European sophistication. Now, looking at these examples, we must still remember that not only is emotion and meaning complex, but it's also constantly changing and shifting, just like occasions, because it's shifting and changing with the culture and society. A somewhat fresher player is Recess. So they looked at culture today and saw a stressed out generation in need of some all encompassing calm. And so they bottled it, or they canned it, packaged it, added a little bit of performative nihilism, and lo and behold, a mood enhancing light of drinks that's flying off the shelves. And the best part about being relevant and strong in your meaning is its limitless potential, because the right kind of emotion and meaning behind your brand is the glue that holds together your entire brand experience. And this is what we'll talk about next. So our sixth and last section will be about your brand beyond the pack. So your entire brand experience, in short. And you know probably that we design a lot of packs, and we do love doing it. It's really fun. And we know the importance of a great packaging. It's what helps you seal your deal, right? It's what helps you to stand out on the shelf. But it's not the full picture, because brand love and awareness and long-term memory are built both before and after someone buys. So you see, physical and mental availability, they go hand in hand, because you buy at the shelf because of what you've seen beyond the shelf. And brands that know this and understand this and use this, they're building something important. They're not just selling drinks, they're building recognition, they're building connection, and they're building loyalty. And shoppers, they don't become loyal fans just because of a great packaging, right? They do it because of consistent, memorable brand experiences that they connect with. That's the important bit, right? That's the real magic. Because when you turn your brand into a brand world, something that people can see and feel and experience across every single touch point, physical, digital, phygital, something that stands out and something that can't really be easily copied. Because people, when they buy Coca-Cola, they don't buy it because they like the red of the can, right? They buy it because they know what that red can stands for, the meaning of the world that's created and installed outside of the pack and the product. Red Bull is really masterful at this. They've created a grand world of adventure, extreme sports, and boundary pushing experiences. So people don't even have to like the drink or buy the drink. God, I'm sorry, I don't like the drink Red Bull, but I buy into this world of Red Bull and everything that they represent. Another amazing example is Hendrick's Gin with their Chambers of the Curious. So they didn't just make a bar, they built a whole world and turned their brand into this immersive experience, almost like an attraction park escape room. I don't even know how to describe it. It's such a hybrid thing. There was storytelling, there was themed decor, there was wardrobe. It was all very carefully crafted, and you were stepping through the Hendrick universe room by room. Another great example is Ricard, because they've been building their brand world for decades, from this iconic glass and pitcher used in the Ricard serving ritual to big spatial activations like Maison Yellow in Marseille. Now, we've also worked on some pretty cool stuff for Campari. And well, we actually worked for one of their brands, Aperol, and we designed some of the physical elements that would convey the brand even when they were used in the sort of a non-brand, non-Aperol branded space, completely off premises. And we've made quite a lot. I've just used these two here, but they were like parasols and chairs and labels and all kinds of stuff. But the idea of this kind of the world and the universe of relaxation and exploration and the aperitivo moment, it had to be conveyed through every single object that is actually represented and used in the Aperol universe. So these are all great examples of how you can take what's in a bottle and expand it into something much bigger, a space that people remember, a space that people talk about, and a space that people want to come back to. So don't stop at building your pack, build your brand world, because your audience, they will notice it and they will also stick around.
All right. Thank you, Diana, and thanks for handling our small technical hiccup so gracefully. Apologies for that. It was really outside of our control. So we'll make sure this doesn't happen next time. That was it for our insights on how to better differentiate your brand in today's dynamic, fast-changing market, covering a couple of the basics and then moving on to the more interesting stuff, the new approaches and techniques. By the way, we'll have a little bit of time, lost a couple of minutes there, unfortunately, to answer any questions you might have. So feel free to put them in the chat or in the specific question section that's at the right-hand bottom of my screen. Just summing things up in the meantime. We spoke in the new approaches and techniques about how you could differentiate your drink better by moving into hybrid propositions or positions. In the second technique, we mentioned how you can better differentiate your brand by tapping into motivations that are largely unused by other players in the category. Thirdly, we spoke about how you can differentiate your brand better by shifting from temporal, spatial, factual descriptions of occasions into more fragmented mental occasions. Then we talked about how you can differentiate your brand better by shifting the type of authenticity that you use, where the typical Instagrammy millennial visual style does not come across as authenticity anymore. And honestly, unabashed, unashamed commercial authenticity is appreciated much more by Gen Z, and it unlocks a world of visual impact for your brand. We spoke about how you can differentiate your brand or beverage by positioning yourself emotionally. And lastly, we spoke about how you can differentiate your brand or beverage by adjusting the scope and the breadth of where your brand appears, from very limited focused on a pack to full experiences or full brand worlds, spatial or otherwise. And that sums up our webinar for today. Obviously,
thanks, Thomas. Sorry for interrupting and just managing time here. Thomas and Diana, thanks. Great presentation. I've received directly a couple of questions, so if you're okay with that, I'll ask them to you, and then to decide who of you will answer them. First one is on Gen Alpha. It's there. It's on the horizon. This generation nears legal drinking age. How do you see that impact the beverages space?
Shall I take that one, Diana?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
All right. Good question. Puts me on the spot a bit. We're talking about both alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages. Obviously, legal drinking age, yes, that's and we're talking about alcoholic beverages. I think, interestingly, we're seeing a shift very similar to what you see with smoking and vaping, where you see an alternative technology-enabled or science-enabled way of offering tobacco habits, smoking, supposedly without some of the drawbacks. And you see the same thing happen with the high social tonic, where they're offering a buzz, a high, call it a float, call it whatever you want. But where you see, and I can see that happening in I mean, obviously Gen Z is drinking less, Gen Alpha is drinking even less, where they would shift into a category that offers some kind of buzz, but without the drawbacks. So that's, obviously a wide open space. Functional drinks are another, I think, important category. I mean, it follows the medical space, and that's shifting completely towards, unique target audience of one, medical benefits with gene therapy. So I'm assuming functional drinks and soft medical benefits will also move into being more really uniquely tailored to one person rather than just being on a retail shelf and dealing with a wide group of consumers.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Maybe a last question, if that's okay for you. Question that appears a couple of times. What's the brand that you like the most in the drink space? Who stands out?
Oof, I mean, I'm assuming I'm taking this one. That's a difficult one, right? Because there's so many. There's so many ones that are really doing great at the moment. I'm a big fan of what's happening in the THC market right now, but I know that's not up for grabs everywhere, especially with European legislation. I think a really classic one and like a really strong one is Oatly, just because of what they did as a brand, not only for themselves, but for the alternative dairy market. In a space that used to be kind of so boring, and to be honest, it used to be just like very medical, right? It stemmed from a problematic of like not being able to digest dairy, and they made it cool. Like they made it really hip and in the know. Like you had to know what it was talking about for you to feel included in that. And they tapped into a very specific generation. I think they were mostly talking to millennials, and millennials really like to have that feeling of like, oh, I know what you're talking about. Like this is aimed at me, this kind of little in the know, like haha language. And the way that they took their packaging and redesigned it, it really showed that they knew what they were doing. And they did it so strongly, not only with the pack, but also in how they translated into their communication with their just really very basic, very bold, like white billboard comms that would just say like, oh, if you stopped to read this billboard, we've already like achieved what we wanted. I think that this kind of like way of speaking, and again, in a sense, it was a little bit kind of, there was this radical honesty. It was kind of a little bit playing with sort of maybe commercial comeback already even before, because they weren't really trying to be anything that we're not. And what they did also for the coffee and barista industry was also really great, because they said, well, we're going to also tap into kind of baristas and making lattes and cappuccinos and frappuccinos. So, but I can talk about that one for hours. I think that's a really great example to take a look at how they've evolved themselves and the market.
Okay, thanks, Diana. And thanks again, Thomas. We are nearing the 1 hour broadcast time. Let's maybe finish with the commercial call to action for the audience. So if you want us to review your beverage brand, to challenge it, to bring fresh inspiration to your team, but then also take a look at your brand portfolio, of course, feel free to reach out to us after this webinar. The webinar recording will also be ready-made available and sent to you automatically, so no need to ask for it. In name of WeWantMore again, thanks for being here. Thanks for attending this webinar. A couple of new ones will also be launched very soon, so keep following us on socials and on LinkedIn. And again, Diana and Thomas, always great to have your insights, fresh looks at how this category and categories are moving. Thanks all. Have a nice day. Have a good week, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.